video. Let's get it. So today we will be talking about communism. Like I did last time, we're going to use the Andrew Haywood political ideologies. Now, it is titled under socialism, but under this pretext, it gives both the socialist, communist, and social democratic ideologies. So, how he lists communism through the definition on page 97 is he says that the principle of the common ownership of wealth or system of comprehensive collectivization. Communism is often viewed as Marxism in practice. And then if you go to page 114, he also says that the communist tradition within socialism is defined by a rejection of private property and a clear preference for common or collective ownership. So, what I had said last time when I came to fascism is that the beginning origins of fascism are typically derived through Benito Mussolini and Giovanni Gentile, along with the foundational works of Hegel. This is also in contrast where Karl Marx comes into play, who is the leader and founder of socialism and communist ideologies alongside his buddy Friedrich Engels. So when it came to exactly what Marx believed, it's good to start with the historical materialism. So I had talked briefly last time about the dialectic through Hegel. Now, the dialectic through Hegel is the actualization or self-consciousness of a specific set of ideas. So if you can, history is a progressive transitionary movement is, I think, kind of the best way, at least that I can describe Hegel's philosophy of history, or the phenomenology of spirit, is that you have a specific idea, and that specific idea through the antithesis, synthesis, and thesis contradict each other. And then through those contradictions, you then have the synthesis, which is the overall solution. And then you keep working through that antithesis, thesis, and synthesis process until eventually you keep, sculpting out the right idea, the right actualization of consciousness of what people should hold their viewpoints to be. So through the historical process that Marx considers, he uses a thing called historical materialism. Now, historical materialism is based off of a linear process of how economics worked. So he starts with primitive communism, which he said was the beginning of, before the conflict of private property. So through the conflict of private property, of people deciding, this is my land over here, get away from me, I will subjugate you, I will oppress you, my people are stronger than your people, sort of things. Then it goes from primitive communism to slavery. You have slavery, the conflict, I believe, is like barbarians or something like that. Then you have the conflict through feudalism. Then you have the conflict of capitalism from the Middle Ages of feudalism to the Enlightenment period of industrialized capitalism, mainly seen through, Great Britain, France, Germany. And then to him, what he's hoping is that you then take the means of production from capitalism and try to strip it from its oppressiveness by distributing the collective wealth that capital promotes. And then having all of the workers, like he says in Communist Manifesto, is to have the workers unite. Now, what that means is that the means of production, the distribution of product, so to speak, is through as many people as humanly possible. Everyone kind of has a, some skin in the game, I guess, for lack of a better term. And then through that process, then it becomes communism, which is ultimately the abolition of private property, the abolition of the class struggle, of class consciousness, which is the conflict between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie. I'll get into that in a sec. Abolition of private property, conflict, no class conflict, no social struggle. Everything is kind of unified within the state. Everything is controlled within all of these people, and it's a collective movement. Like I had said last video, fascism and communism are both collectivized movements. What makes them different is that private property ultimately want to be eradicated and removed. There is no class or distinguishable people that are necessarily better, like fascists typically believe. The communists and socialists revert to people as comrades or brothers, because you're all kind of unified together for a common good. That also talks about a person named Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who is very influential to Karl Marx. He had believed a very similar thing of the commonwealth, or the common good, the popular sovereignty of individuals. It's a very popular movement, considering, like democratic socialist elements as well, where democratic socialists typically like to associate those sorts of ideologies, believing that capitalism and democracy are fundamentally incompatible. Noam Chomsky, very famous linguistic and historical philosophical speaker, has commented on the oppressive nature of capitalism when it comes to a United States democratic and capital hegemony, I guess. When it comes to the actualization of these sorts of ideas, you could say that true communism, like a lot of communists and socialists say, has never actually been fully tried and utilized, which is technically true, because there's never been the full distribution of wealth in such a way, or even the removal of wealth like Russia tried in the early 1920s that had failed miserably. There's been attempts and not so much of success when it comes to the removing of private property or of class struggles, which is ultimately what separated Benito Mussolini from Karl Marx and those sorts of socialist and communist thinkers, is that he did believe that class struggles were an inevitability, that class struggles were just always going to happen. It's the same thing that Hitler had also believed when it came to natural selection and Charles Darwin's origins of species. So examples of communism, I guess, would be the Russia is a famous example. China, even though China has some forms of communist sort of identities, but really it becomes more of a, what are they maintaining culturally? Like Maoism is very different than Bolshevism or revolutionary Bolshevism that Vladimir Lenin had used when it came to the vanguard state, the vanguard party, in creating a full authoritarian sort of regime where there's only one specific party, and that is the Communist Party. A lot of people would like to say and give credit to Vladimir Lenin that he hadn't removed freedom of speech and things like that, but it's just not true. He had gotten rid of many avenues of speech. He had propagated the viewpoints of destroying his political opponents and the bloodshed of the the bourgeoisie, that they needed to be eradicated and taken away in order so that the true proletariat, the dictatorship of the proletariat, as Karl Marx had utilized. Even though Karl Marx, a lot of people have said that he probably wouldn't have necessarily even had appreciated what Vladimir Lenin had did within his doctrines and approach. A big difference between Vladimir Lenin and Karl Marx is between their ideas of class consciousness. So whether or not he believed that the class consciousness could actually self-actualize itself, which is, you know, hard to say whether or not it would have actually made any sort of substantial difference. Sorry, actually I need to turn that fan off. I was just really quiet. Okay. But yeah, when it comes to class consciousness, the difference between Vladimir Lenin's class consciousness is that there needs to be actual movement into those sorts of ideas. There needs to be people in power that are working towards those goals day and night. That is their job. That is actually what they do. And people need to create this sort of revolutionary utopian vision. Whereas Karl Marx had believed that it will just naturally occur, kind of like with what Hegel, you know, maybe if they'll just talk about it, they'll self-actualize with it, they'll eventually gain that sort of consciousness. Same sort of idea when it comes to self-consciousness and the absolute spirit of Hegel's dialectical process. So instead of, you know, more abstract, in reality, it's more materialistic, it's more economics. If you can maximize economic pursuits and economic happiness, then people will naturally feel better about themselves. So if you can get rid of class struggles like it used to be with lordsmen or statesmen, or, you know, capital, or, you know, proletariat or bourgeoisie, or slave or non-slave, master and slave, those sorts of ideas. Oh, sorry, my dog. Okay. But yeah, those are the ideas. But hopefully that was clear, that was concise. and I kind of rambled on a lot. But yeah, those are the key principles. No private property, no class struggle. Typically it's manifested through the dictatorship of the state, especially with Stalinist Russia or Mao Zedong's communist China. These sort of, you know, Great Leap Forwards or the Great Purge, these dictatorial positions of power where the dictatorship of the proletariat, they never actually get rid of that sort of position or give that proletarian power to the people. So true communism, true socialism, never actually been tried. There have been aspects of it in everyday life when it comes to, you know, like even in the United States, there's been democratic socialism, or there's been not democratic socialism, social democracy, which is, you know, mainly through the welfare state and the government just providing resources and income back to people, which is typically associated with modern liberalism, roughly speaking. So FDR's period of time, LBJ's Great Society, those sorts of things, you know, actualizing people's freedoms and happiness and choices to then give back to the capitalistic system, believing that capitalism can be, you know, fixed, altered, corrected, refined, those sorts of things. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. A little bit shorter than the other one, but yeah, all right, stay tuned for more.